The air crackled with anticipation. This wasn't just another late-night interview. It was a clash of titans, a generational showdown. The buzz surrounding Karoline Leavitt's appearance on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert had been simmering for weeks, boiling over into a full-blown media frenzy. Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in history, a mere 27 years old, embodied Gen Z style and unshakable loyalty to Donald Trump now in his controversial second term. She wasn't just the face of a conservative administration, she was the controversy. Trump's second term had been a firestorm. He'd banned the Associated Press and Reuters from cabinet meetings, slapped hefty tariffs on Canada, and brokered a contentious Russia-Ukraine deal. Every time Leavitt went on air, she stirred the pot. From her defiant statement, "Canada is on its knees," to turning the White House TikTok account into a viral sensation, she was accused of being Trump's puppet, a youthful facade masking the administration's perceived failures. Colbert, never one to shy away from confrontation, had vowed to expose her. This interview, more than ever, was a fight for survival. Comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The applause had barely faded when Karoline Leavitt stepped onto the Late Show stage. Her blonde hair gleamed under the bright lights. Dressed in a sharp, dark outfit with a touch of Gen Z flair, an oversized jacket, and crisp white sneakers, she exuded confidence. A slight smile played on her lips, but her eyes were sharp, like a blade, ready to parry any attack from Stephen Colbert. The audience erupted in a mixture of enthusiastic applause and boos, the latter clearly from those who held a deep disdain for the Trump administration. She gave a brief, almost dismissive wave, and sat down in the chair opposite Colbert, her posture relaxed, yet unmistakably alert. Colbert leaned forward, his signature half-smile firmly in place. "Karoline, welcome to the show," he said, his tone superficially friendly, but his eyes betrayed a keen, probing intent. 27 years old, the youngest press secretary in history. Pretty impressive. But I have to ask, does working for Donald Trump ever feel like babysitting someone who refuses to grow up? Laughter exploded from the audience, punctuated by a few whistles of approval. Leavitt, unfazed, let out a light, almost condescending laugh. "Thanks for the welcome, Stephen," she replied, her voice calm but laced with a subtle, cutting edge. "But no, I don't babysit anyone. I work with the GOAT, the greatest of all time. He's saving America, and I'm just here to get that message out." Colbert raised an eyebrow, refusing to let her off the hook. "GOAT, huh? Interesting. But speaking of saving America, last week you said Canada is on its knees after Trump slapped those tariffs on them. Do you think that's a productive way to build neighborly relations, or just a way to flex muscle?" He crossed his arms, waiting, as the audience fell silent, their eyes glued to Leavitt. Leavitt tilted her head, her smile unchanging. "Stephen, you want to talk economics, right? Look at the numbers. Canada relies on us far more than we need them. Tariffs are leverage, and it's working. Trump knows how to play tough, and I'm here to tell the truth. We win, they lose. No cap." Scattered applause rose from one corner of the audience, but there were also audible murmurs of dissent. Colbert nodded, as if agreeing, but then quickly pivoted. "All right, no cap, I like that Gen Z vibe of yours. But about truth, Karoline, what's going on with the press? Your administration banned the AP and Reuters from cabinet meetings last month. Is that how Trump wins? By silencing those who ask questions?" His tone sharpened, his eyes locking onto hers, clearly pushing her into a corner. Leavitt didn't blink. She sat up straighter, gesturing lightly for emphasis. "Stephen, don't overplay it. We're not silencing anyone. AP and Reuters were cut because they don't report honestly. They push an anti-Trump narrative instead of focusing on the facts. Americans don't trust the old media like you anymore. And we filter who gets in to make sure the message reaches the right people. That's not silencing. That's a vibe check for the press." She paused, staring directly at Colbert. "Ever heard of something called trust? We're rebuilding it. Colbert laughed, but it wasn't a relaxed laugh. It was sharp, almost mocking. Vibe check for the press. Sounds like a fancy way of saying controlling the narrative. You know, Caroline, press freedom is the backbone of America, not something for Trump and you to filter like a TikTok guest list. The audience roared with laughter, some clapping in agreement. He leaned closer. You say Americans don't trust the media. But do they trust a government that picks who gets to speak and who doesn't? Leavitt smiled, but this time, it was a challenging smile. Stephen, are you stuck in 1990 or something? Americans trust us because they see results. Jobs, the economy, peace. Trump doesn't need the old media to prove it, and neither do I. We've got X, TikTok, and my 728,000 followers to talk straight to them. You want to call that control? I call it cutting out the outdated middleman. She crossed her arms, her eyes blazing. If you want to talk about freedom, ask why media outlets like yours keep pushing one-sided stories. The air in the late show studio began to thicken, like smoke. The applause and boos from the audience blended into a chaotic symphony. Stephen Colbert, still sporting his half-smile, but with eyes now as sharp as a blade, didn't take them off Karoline Leavitt. She sat across from him, legs crossed, hands resting lightly on her lap, her expression calm, but her gaze equally fiery. Colbert tapped the desk lightly, leaning forward like a fighter about to land a knockout punch. Caroline, you just said cutting out the outdated middleman. I get your point, but let's dig deeper into this press thing, he said, his tone even but loaded with intent. You say AP and Reuters aren't honest, so they're banned from cabinet meetings. Do you really think that's how a transparent government works? Or is it a sign of a White House trying to muzzle anyone bold enough to ask questions? The audience went quiet for a split second, awaiting her response. Leavitt tilted her head, a smirk creeping up, as if she'd seen the punch coming. Stephen, you're trying to paint me as the bad guy, huh? She started, her voice soft but sharp as a razor. I'll clear it up for you and everyone here. We're not muzzling anyone. AP and Reuters aren't banned for asking questions. They're banned because they don't report. They spin stories. They push an anti-Trump narrative, twisting facts to fit their angle. Americans aren't stupid, they see it. We're just saying, if you want in the room, play fair. That's not control. That's putting the people above old media like you. Applause erupted from one corner of the audience, loud and firm. But the boos from the other side were just as fierce. Colbert raised an eyebrow, clearly unsatisfied with her answer. Play fair, he echoed, his voice rising slightly, laced with sarcasm. Caroline, you just called the world's biggest news outlets dishonest and then said your administration, not exactly known for transparency, gets to judge the truth. Don't you see the contradiction? Press freedom isn't something the White House filters like an Instagram friends list. The audience burst into laughter, a few whistles of approval ringing out. He crossed his arms, staring at her with a challenging look. Leavitt didn't flinch. She sat up straighter, gesturing naturally, as if addressing a TikTok crowd. Stephen, you want to talk contradictions? Look at yourself. You sit here, making money off mocking people, and then pretend to be freedom's guardian. I grew up in a middle-class family in New Hampshire. No politics, no privilege. My parents sold ice cream and used trucks to raise me. I know what Americans want. More than some ivory tower news outlet or a millionaire host like you. We banned AP and Reuters not to hide, but to protect the truth from being twisted. Trump's working for the people, not for you guys. Her voice was steady, her gaze sweeping the audience, like she was reeling them in. The applause rang out again, louder this time, but the murmurs of dissent weren't quiet either. Colbert laughed, but it was a dry, humorless laugh. Oh, I love how you tell it, Caroline, real touching, but you didn't answer the question. If Trump's so transparent, why not let the press do their job? Why pick who gets in and who doesn't? Sounds like a government scared of being exposed more than protecting the truth. He paused, letting the words sink in, as the audience clapped sporadically, some nodding in agreement. Leavitt smiled, but it was a defiant smile, unshaken. "Stephen, you're trying to steer this, but I'm not letting you. We're not scared of exposure. We're scared of wasting time with people who don't care about the truth. Do you know how many Americans have ditched the old media? They don't watch TV news anymore. They're on X, TikTok, where we talk straight to them. I've got 728,000 followers on X, not because I make stuff up, but because I'm real. Because if you want transparency, ask why media outlets, like yours, keep pushing one-sided stories instead of letting people decide for themselves." She crossed her arms, her gaze locked on Colbert as if saying, "What else you got?" Colbert shook his head, his faint smile tightening into a straight line. "Talking straight to them on TikTok, Karoline? You're turning the White House into a social media channel. But I guess that's the Gen Z way, dodging questions by posting dance videos." The audience laughed louder, some clapping in support. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "You say you're real, but I see someone justifying choking the press by blaming the press. What kind of logic is that?" Leavitt didn't waver. She let out a light laugh, but her eyes held no humor. "Stephen, you just said I dance on TikTok. No cap, I've never done that. But if I did, I'd still outdo you. As for logic, here's mine. Old media, like you, lost America's trust a long time ago. We're not choking the press. We're replacing it with something better, more direct. Trump doesn't need you guys to tell people who he is. And neither do I. If you want to question me, go ahead, but don't expect me to play by your script." She paused, staring right at him, her eyes blazing like an unquenchable flame. The Late Show studio now felt like an arena, the air so thick the audience could feel every breath. The applause and boos still echoed, but silence fell as Stephen Colbert leaned forward, hands braced on the desk, his gaze locked on Karoline Leavitt. His mocking smile was gone, replaced by a stern, almost angry expression. "Karoline, I've heard enough about your TikTok and real talk," he said, his voice low, but sharp as the keenest blade. "You say you're changing the world, but I see it differently. You're not just press secretary, you're complicit in undermining American democracy. You're selling out the younger generation, turning Gen Z into a tool for a man trying to strangle freedom just to cling to power. What do you say to that?" The words hit like a bomb, the audience gasping, a few shocked cries mixing with scattered applause from the liberal side. Leavitt sat still for a moment, her eyes hardening, but then her lips curved into a cold, dangerous smile. She crossed her arms, tilting her head as if weighing every word from Colbert. The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop, all eyes on her. "Stephen, you just called me complicit in undermining democracy?" she began, her voice soft, but carrying a storm ready to break. "You dare say I'm selling out Gen Z? All right, I'll give you a dose of real talk you'll never forget. You're the hypocrite, sitting in your millionaire ivory tower, pretending to care about democracy while profiting off dividing this country. Trump saved America from the mess people like you left behind, and I'm here to defend him, not to please outdated MCs like you." Applause exploded from the conservative side, loud enough to drown out the liberal boos. A man in the front row shouted, "Karoline's right," while the person next to him stood, raising a hand in protest. Leavitt didn't stop, gesturing like she was live streaming, her eyes ablaze. "You want to talk democracy? Look at yourself. Every night you pick who gets laughed at, who gets mocked. Who's the villain in your script? I grew up in New Hampshire. My parents worked their hands raw to raise me. No privilege, like you. I know what Gen Z wants. A strong country, not manipulated by old media like you. Trump delivers that, and I'm proud to stand with him. You call that selling out? I call it winning." "No cap," her voice rang out firm and unyielding. Colbert leaned back, tapping the desk, clearly caught off guard by the ferocity of her response, but he didn't back down. "Winning?" he echoed, his tone sarcastic yet determined. "Karoline, you're good at talking real, but I'm not talking about how you grew up or what Trump does. I'm talking about you. You stand behind that White House podium justifying banning the press, pushing divisive policies, and turning politics into a social media game. You think Gen Z wants a country where freedom's traded for tariffs and TikTok? You're helping Trump build a regime, not a democracy." He paused, his eyes flashing like a fighter landing a final blow. The audience clapped louder, some standing, whistles of approval ringing out. Leavitt laughed, but this time it was a cold, almost scornful laugh. She sat up straighter, gesturing like she was driving home every word. "Stephen, you just called Trump a regime? You really think I'll sit here and let you paint me as a traitor? I'm not building a regime. I'm building a future. Gen Z doesn't want your fake moral lectures. They want jobs, security, a country that doesn't kneel to anyone. Trump ends wars, brings jobs back, and I'm here to tell that truth." "You say I'm undermining democracy? No. I'm tearing down the rotten system you're part of, a system that's failed Americans for ages." She paused, her gaze locked on Colbert, daring him to strike again. In that moment, a memory flashed in Leavitt's mind. July 2024, when she gave birth to her son in a tough delivery, just days after Trump's near assassination in Pennsylvania. She'd returned to work right away, standing by Trump when he needed her most. That loyalty, that pressure, now fueled the fire in every word she spoke. "I'm a mother, Stephen," she continued, her voice dropping but stronger than ever. "I do this not just for Trump, but for my son, for his generation. You don't get that because all you do is sit here and laugh. But I don't back down. Never." The studio erupted. Applause from the conservative side thundered, drowning out the liberal boos. A group in the middle row stood cheering, while others shook their heads, muttering dissent. Colbert leaned back, hands off the desk, his eyes flickering with unease, but quickly regaining composure. "A mother, huh?" he said, his voice low, tinged with sarcasm. "I respect that, Karoline, but don't use your kid to justify helping Trump strangle freedom. You say you're tearing down the system. I see you tearing down what makes America, and Gen Z will pay for it." He leaned closer, eyes blazing with resolve. "Are you sure you're building a future or just burning it?" She crossed her arms, her eyes blazing like an unextinguishable flame. The studio broke loose. Applause and boos merged into an unprecedented storm of sound. A woman screamed, "Karoline's the queen!" while the person beside her stood, raising a hand in protest. Stephen Colbert leaned back, his eyes now a mix of confusion and determination to regain control. Karoline Leavitt, facing him, stayed poised, arms crossed, her fiery gaze as intense as ever. Her cold smile lingered, a wordless challenge. Colbert took a deep breath, leaning forward, his voice low but loaded. "Karoline, you talk a lot about winning and building a future," he began. "So let's talk about a specific Trump win you're proud of. The Russia deal to end the Ukraine war. You call it peace, but plenty call it a cave-in. You think bowing to Putin is how to make America great?" The question landed like a heavy stone, the audience hushing for a moment, awaiting her reply. Leavitt tilted her head, a smirk creeping up, as if she'd anticipated the blow. "Stephen, you just said Trump bowed to Putin?" she replied, her voice soft, but sharp as a razor. "No, Cap, you're dead wrong. We didn't cave. We brought peace. Trump sat down with Russia, negotiated like a real leader, and now Ukraine's no longer a battlefield. You call that bowing? I call it winning. Winning for America, winning for the world. You want the war to drag on, just so media like you have something to criticize?" She gestured lightly, her eyes sweeping the audience, as if pulling them to her side. Applause erupted from the conservative side, loud and resolute, but the boos from the liberal side were just as fierce. A man in the middle row shouted, "Peace is real," before being drowned out by murmurs of dissent. Colbert shook his head, a faint smile returning. But this time, it was the smile of someone gearing up for a counterattack. "Peace is real. I like how you put that, Karoline," he said, his tone laced with sarcasm. "But look closely. Russia still holds Crimea. Ukraine lost land, and Putin's grinning on TV. Whose victory is that? Not America's. Certainly not Ukraine's. You say Trump negotiated like a leader, but I see a guy who let Russia win without firing a shot. Don't you find that worrying?" He crossed his arms, his gaze challenging. The audience clapped sporadically, some nodding in agreement. Leavitt let out a light laugh, but it wasn't a cheerful one. It was a laugh of disdain. She sat up straighter, gesturing like she was emphasizing every word. "Stephen, you're trying to paint the picture you want, but I'm not letting you do that. Trump didn't let Russia win. He ended a war you guys just sat back and griped about. Crimea, Ukraine. That was a mess before Trump came back. And he fixed it by bringing everyone to the table." Colbert nodded, as if agreeing, but a new spark of determination flashed in his eyes. "Horror stories? No, Karoline, I'm just stating the truth you don't want to hear," he replied, his voice rising slightly. "I don't need data to know caving to a guy like Putin is a sign of weakness, not strength. You say Americans want peace, sure, but they also want an America that doesn't kneel to anyone. You cling to the past while we're moving forward, with X, TikTok, and my 728,000 followers to prove it." She crossed her arms, her eyes blazing, as if daring Colbert to strike again. The studio erupted again, applause from the conservative side overpowering the liberal boos. A woman in the front row raised her hand and yelled, "Trump's smart!" while the person next to her shook their head, muttering dissent.